Hello everyone. Today we look back at a case from the 1930s. The case was committed in Poland, but today the city it was committed in is part of the Ukraine. So sit back as we look at the case of Rita Gorgonowa. Rita was born on the 7th of March 1901 in Kunun, which then was part of the Austro-Hungary Empire, but today it is a city in Croatia, about 300 kilometers south of Croatia's capital, Zagreb. Her father was a doctor, but he died when Rita was just 3 years old. In 1916, when she was 15, she married an officer of the Austro-Hungarian army named Rita Gorgonowa, and after 2 years she gave birth to a son. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was on the losing side of the First World War, and in 1918, with the army pretty much disbanded and the Austro-Hungarian Empire breaking up, Erwin returned home without a job and unable to provide for his wife and young son. Soon after that, their economic situation forced them to move to Lviv with Erwin's parents. Things became difficult and Erwin became depressed and he was unable to support his wife and young son. He started to go out drinking at night and began to use the services of prostitutes. In 1921, he decided that it would be best if he went to the USA to find work and join the thousands of Europeans seeking better opportunities available in North America. Rita was a beautiful lady, and the moment her husband left for the USA, his brothers and his father began to compete for her affections. This did not stop at family members. Whenever she went out, she was always courted by men. Rita rejected everyone's advances, and she was looking forward to the day when the letter would arrive instructing her to leave the town and, along with her young son, take the boat to be with her husband. Eventually the letter arrived, and Rita excitedly made preparations for her journey. Things were not quite as straightforward as she had imagined. Erwin's brothers and family members, who had been rejected by her, quickly decided to take revenge. They sent a letter to Erwin in which they informed him that his charming wife had been finding comfort in the arms of many men and often did not return home at night, leaving them to look after his son. Erwin wrote back to his family, instructing them to throw Rita out of their home and take care of his son. Rita wrote to her husband, telling him that everything his family had said about her was untrue, but Rita was now on her own, and with nowhere to live and no job, she began nursing and earning her living as a governess. In 1924, Rita was given the job as governess in the home of Henryk Zaremba. He was a very successful architect and also owned a construction company. He lived in Lviv with his 2 children. The oldest was called Elizabeta, but known as Louisa, and she was born in 1914. The youngest child was a son, whose name was Stanislaw. Unfortunately, Henryk's wife had suffered from mental problems, and as her health had deteriorated so much, it was agreed that she would live in a psychiatric hospital. Henryk's work commitments meant that he was unable to take care of the children alone, so decided to employ a full-time governess. This was a good position for Rita, as it gave her a nice place to live, and she had full control of the children, and after a while, she also started running the house. Rita proved to be a very good employee, but the 23-year-old beautiful nanny was soon attracting too much attention from her 41-year-old employer, and about a year after she started working for the family, Rita and Henryk started to have an affair. Henryk wanted to keep the relationship informal, but Rita wanted to marry him. She wanted to have some security in her life, and Henryk would certainly be able to provide it. Rita eventually became pregnant, and in 1928 she gave birth to a daughter they named Rumini. Rita may have felt a bit more secure now. She was the mother of Henryk's 3rd child, but not being married, she knew that her position was still vulnerable. She was still considered to be a very beautiful woman, and when she went into the city, she was always approached by men, and she never hid the fact that she very much liked all the male attention. Ever since she had started working for the family, she had often received telephone calls from male admirers and received many letters. Louisa had always noticed Rita's way, and as Louisa grew older, she started to suspect that Rita may not just be her father's lover. She informed him about all her concerns, and everything she had observed since Rita had entered their lives. After this, the relationship between Henrik and Rita started to cool. Rita was seeing that her opportunity of a better life was evaporating, and tension started to grow between Rita and her lover's firstborn child. Henrik was nearly 20 years older than Rita, and he started thinking that maybe it was his wealth that she was more interested in rather than him. He decided to end their relationship and told Rita that everything was going to change. It was Christmas 1931, and he did not want to disrupt the family celebrations, so told her that on January the 1st, 1932, she would have to move to one of his other properties and he would stay with the children. Rita reluctantly agreed, but demanded $10,000 from Henrik as a settlement. Henrik said this was an unacceptable amount, but thought that when a little time had passed, they could agree on a fair settlement. Around midnight on the 30th of December 1931, the house was awoken by Stanislaw, who was screaming that his sister was dead. He ran from her room and bumped into Rita, who was wearing a fur coat. A moment later, Henrik appeared, and he rushed to his daughter's bedroom to find her lifeless body. He attempted to resuscitate her, but his efforts were in vain. Louisa had been murdered. The police were called and made a thorough inspection of the crime scene and interviewed everyone in the house. The most interesting witness was 14-year-old Stanislaw, who had discovered the body. He said that he was awoken when he heard the family dog whining outside his room. Assuming that a thief had entered the house, he looked out of the window but did not see anything suspicious. He got out of bed and went to the hall, where he noticed a mysterious figure hiding behind the Christmas tree. He thought it was his sister, so he called out her name, but nobody answered. He then entered her room and saw his sister with her head covered by a pillow. When he removed it, he was confronted by Louisa's blood-stained face, and her neck was twisted. He thought she was dead. The police searched the property. Outside, the ground was covered in snow. They found a tool for making holes in the ice at the bottom of the swimming pool. They noticed that Rita was wearing wet slippers and her right hand was cut. They asked her what had caused the injury. She replied that she had cut herself as a window in her room had broken. She said that her feet were wet as she went to the swimming pool in the snow to get some water, which was strange as there was water in the kitchen. The police believed that she had gone to the pool to dump the murder weapon. The police also found blood on the slippers, which Rita explained as being there as she had been gutting fish the previous day. Stanislaw told the police that the figure behind the Christmas tree looked like Rita, and when she appeared after he had woken the house, Rita had traces of blood on her hands and was wearing a fur coat indoors. The police also found a blood-stained handkerchief in the basement. They found no evidence of breaking and entering, and the snow around the house had not been disturbed by any footsteps from a stranger. The police have major reservations about Rita's story, so they arrested her, and they also arrested Henrik. Rita protested and said she was completely innocent of the crime. In the press, there was already a rush to judge her. Much of the circumstantial evidence pointed to her as a murderer. This was coupled with her strange behaviour on that fateful night. The murder had to have been committed by someone inside the house. Who else but Rita would have done it? The family gardener was investigated but soon cleared. Another potential suspect was a boy who had declared his love for Louisa. She had shown him little interest. He was also cleared, and 6 weeks after being arrested, Henrik was released without charge. The police decided that they had enough evidence to charge Rita, and on April the 23rd, 1932, the trial of Rita Gorgonowa, accused of murdering Louisa Zaremba, began. Investigators outlined to the court the likely version of events. They strongly ruled out that some stranger could have done it. There were no suspicious footprints around the villa, no signs of burglary. The dog did not bark, which he always did, and the traces of blood found on a handkerchief were confirmed as a blood group, which was the same as Louisa's. According to the investigators, Rita left her room and entered Louisa's bedroom and killed her. She then violated her to try and make it look like a sexually motivated attack. To make the scene look more realistic, she opened the window of the bedroom and wanted to go to the porch, but she stumbled upon the dog. She then hit him in the head to silence him, and he started whining and cried out in pain. The whimper of the dog woke Stanislaw, who left his room, so Rita stood behind the Christmas tree. She thought he had not seen her, so she ran to her bedroom and changed into her nightgown. She then joined up with the rest of her household, desperately trying to save Louisa. She said she would get some water, so went to the pool to dispose of the murder weapon. On the way to the pool, she put the nightgown she was wearing when she committed the murder into the wood burner, which was why the police found traces of kerosene on the stove and why Rita smelt slightly of kerosene on the fateful night. Rita constantly denied the accusations and continued to plead her innocence. Her lawyer said that all the evidence against her was circumstantial. The lawyer also asked the court to send the victim's brother Stanislaw to be examined by psychologists, but the court rejected this request. He also asked why the police had not examined the similarities with the murder of an equally young girl in the same way just a few days later. Despite the circumstantial evidence, Rita was found guilty of murder on the 14th of May 1932 and sentenced to death by hanging. It was later revealed that this was not a unanimous verdict, as only 9 of the 12 jurors found her to be guilty. At the end of her trial, her lawyer informed the court that she was pregnant. He stated that the father of the child was Henrik Zaremba, and the child was conceived on Christmas Eve 1931, a week before the murder of Louisa. Henrik strongly denied that Rita was pregnant with his baby and announced that he would not recognise the child. On September the 22nd, 1932, Rita gave birth to her daughter. Henrik still claimed that he was not the father of the child. His life was going downhill and his construction company collapsed. The defence filed an appeal to the Supreme Court, and it was agreed that a second trial could take place, which began on March 6, 1933 in Krakow. The defence claimed that all the evidence was circumstantial and that on the night the police decided that Rita was guilty without really looking into the other people in the house on the night. All the evidence was scrutinised and the defence team did a very good job of establishing reasonable doubt. They focused on the fact that pretty much the whole case was based on statements of a 14-year-old child. The defence suggested that the boy had a vivid imagination. They said he'd embellished his testimony, stating that his statement changed from saying that the mysterious figure hidden behind the Christmas tree was a shapeless person, to the figure was wearing a fur coat, to saying it was Rita. They asked if it was a young boy himself who could have committed the crime. He was the child of a mentally ill mother and often sleepwalked and woke up in various parts of the house. Public opinion was still very much against Rita, a beautiful woman who had seduced an older man and allegedly murdered his daughter. The court once again found Rita guilty, but this time reduced her sentence to 8 years in prison. On September the 3rd, 1939, 2 days after the outbreak of the Second World War, Rita was given early release from prison and moved to a shelter for refugees in Warsaw. She was often recognised on the street and people would taunt her and shout "murderer," but Rita always denied the crime and declared her innocence. After she was released from prison, little is known of what happened to Rita. She separated from the daughter she gave birth to in prison. The young girl would spend much of her childhood in children's homes, where the other children would often tell her that her mother was a murderess. Some reports say that Rita ran a newsstand. Other reports say that she left Europe and went to live in South America. In 2014, the daughter that Rita never saw again and Rita's granddaughter announced an attempt to get a retrial and show the world that Rita was innocent. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. If any of you have any idea what really happened to Rita in the years following her release from prison, I would be fascinated to know. And I will see you in the next brief case.